Could you also give us a sense in terms of the investment, right, for the manufacturing process? Let's use a fab as an example. I mean, what type of investment are we talking about? How much time it takes to build one?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons, even though the capacity crunch of the semiconductors started more than 2 years ago, it has not been solved yet. It's because it takes 2 to 3 years to build a fab from scratch. If you have no building and nothing, I mean, it takes just the planning, just to get the funding. It takes hundreds of millions of dollars, if not close to a billion, depending on the technology. You need to make sure that a capacity is going to be utilized, so you need customers for that. And then just to build the clean room, the site, and the tools can take anywhere from 1 to 2 years to get some of the tools to make the wafers. So that's why, as we identified, the industry identified the shortage, it's going to take 2 to 3 years for that to balance itself. New capacity is coming online, but not for every single technology. Some older technologies, people are not investing, and that will create a kind of an imbalance for probably a little bit longer time. Other ones, high-end nodes, or the latest technology, that's where most foundries are investing. So yeah, it's just the time to develop that is very long. That's why it's a big challenge versus other industries that probably you can probably resolve capacity situations in 3 to 6 months. This just takes a long time to resolve.
What you described earlier in terms of end-to-end supply chain, I mean, there are different players, right? Each player, maybe the category of the company, might contribute a different value. And a given example will be, there are companies who might doing everything, right? The design, the research development, the wafer fabrication, as well as the final device and testing, packaging, everything, right? And then an example I could think of, like Intel. And could you like tell us a different way that you could make a contribution and impact within the semiconductor industry in terms of their approach, their business model?
Yeah, so there are different business models. So you have players like Intel that design and they own fabs and everything. But also you have a lot of very successful fabless companies that just outsource all the foundry manufacturing. They just concentrate on the design of the component.
Could you give us an example of fabless?
Well, obviously, Qualcomm is one of the largest. AMD, I believe, is also fabless. Marvell Technologies, fairly large company as well. So those are companies that have no fabs and just rely on their foundry partners to do that. And then you have the hybrid. There are a lot of companies that have wafer fabs, assembly, and in-house manufacturing for portions of the technology or the process, and they outsource other pieces to the depending on the technology. So you have the whole spectrum: companies that do A to Z, and companies that only do the design portion of the devices. All models are successful. There are very successful companies in all three models these days.
So what is the current bottleneck in terms of ramping up for more supply to resolve the shortage problem?
Yeah, so I mean, right now the key bottleneck, and there was a report from the U.S. government. They that publishes this public information. So they ask all the companies to kind of explain what's going on with the industry. And no surprise, the wafer production is the main bottleneck, and that one is the one that I explained that it takes 2 to 3 years to build new wafer fabs or expand capacity in existing fabs, and that's the main bottleneck. So as a result, there are a lot of activity to expand capacity as fast as you can. Also, the U.S. government is doing a lot of promotion for moving more domestic production, within the U.S. and try to bring some of the manufacturing capabilities in-house. So you probably heard the news. A lot of companies are investing in U.S. fabs, like TSMC, Global Foundries, and such, Intel as well. So yes, that is the main supply shortage right now. And people sometimes ask me recently, hey, why I cannot get my car? I'm supposed to get a new car and I cannot get it. They say they don't have semiconductors. And so I kind of explain why. And the automotive industry is very, very unique, right? They were famous for running a just-in-time model where you have zero inventory and the parts just come 1 or 2 days of inventory. Well, that model didn't work when you're short of supply and suddenly you cannot get parts for 9 months. So that's probably what you've seen in the news. They're missing probably a $1 component, and they cannot ship a $50,000 car to the end customer. So I think they're gonna probably change their whole perspective on the amount of inventory to hold on certain components. But they're gonna probably scratch the just-in-time concept for this type of components at least. So yeah, that's the situation.
Yeah, that's a classic example about the downside of just in time. I wanted to maybe zoom into a little bit in terms of the capacity planning, which is today's topic. So the semiconductor industry capex in 2021 reached 152 billion US dollar in 2021. And prior to 2021, the industry had never spent more than 115 billion on annual capex. Do you think the trend will continue?
I think we'll continue definitely. I saw some forecasts that in 2022, which is we're already into this year, the spend is going to be greater than 150 billion. My guess is that we'll probably stay flat in 23 and 24, and then probably will continue to grow as supply and demand will eventually balance out. Some people say it's going to be during the summer that it will balance. Some people think it's going to be until next year of 23. It's hard to do, depending on the different variables impacting this supply demand situation. But yeah, it has to go down. It cannot keep up like that. I mean, at this rate of growth, because then there will be excess capacity for sure.
So you have mentioned earlier about a cycle, right? 5 to 8 years. So you have lived through many ups and downs within the industry. So maybe could you give us an example or share a story from your own experience that why is capacity planning essential and what are the challenges? And what could you do to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, that's a good and tough question because there's no clear answer because every situation and every cycle is a little bit different. But in my experience, I've seen cases. There was one particular case that we saw very strong demand signal from the customers. Back then, I was working for a company that had fabs. We decided to expand internally the capacity. We spent tens of millions of dollars back then. And then we saw the forecast from the end customers start to go down. Month after month, when we received the customer forecast, started to go down and down. And by then, you already placed, orders for tools. You're probably already building a new clean room, a new fab. In some cases, breaking ground for new factories. And after we saw a big decline, there was some economic downturn at the time. Then you have to put the brakes on all the tools and everything. So at the point that we had to stop some tools that were actually shipping, they were ready to be lifted and delivered, and we have to put the stop on some of those orders and delay for 6 months, 1 year. I mean, many cases that tools are idle for 1 or 2 years because you just expand capacity based on a unvalidated customer forecast. So that's the key. Is that I think what you will see now moving forward is that people are going to be more skeptical to just add capacity without having some agreement with the customer. So it has to be more of a joint agreement that okay, I will invest and I will add capacity, but at the same time, I need some guarantees that that demand is going to come true. Or so that's, I mean, there are a lot of partnerships that have been announced, especially in the automotive industry. I saw in the news that Ford and GM have signed partnerships with a lot of semiconductor companies just to secure supply for the next 5-10 years. The cars, last a lot longer and the cycles are longer, so they can probably easily justify longer agreements, right? So yeah, that's one of the key lessons learned that do not expand capacity just on a PowerPoint slide from a customer telling you that they're gonna grow 50% a year for the next 5 years. It's very risky, just without any agreement.
Yeah, so it's very interesting that many people got to know semiconductor shortages because of the automobile industry, right? Because they couldn't get a car, and a lot of factory has to stop because of shortage of the component. But maybe not many people would know. Actually, I look up the statistics that automobile is only taking 11.4% of the demand drivers of semiconductors. That means almost 90% semiconductors are going to other industry. So I thought that was a very interesting perspective. And the second thing is also now we learn about it just in time, and there are the classic sort of best practice within the industry also have its downside with a shortage a crisis like right now. So now, Francisco, when we're facing unprecedented shortages and growing uncertainties, right, what learnings could we apply to determine the possible strategy between just in time and just in case?
I think a lot of companies are rethinking their strategies. One other trend that came in that report from the U.S. government is that the overall semiconductor inventory went down from 40 days on average to 5 days, and 5 days is nothing. That means there's any delay, even on freight. Something happens at the Long Beach port, you won't get your components, right? I think everybody's rethinking their inventory strategy, and I believe most companies are willing to invest in a larger inventory, just as a buffer to prevent the ups and downs of supply and demand. So we'll see an inventory correction to the increase in inventory in the companies in general. On top of that, you will probably see a lot of companies, just engaging with their suppliers to really have a more frank discussion about the forecast and be more transparent about the demand. What is the real demand and what is the inventory buffer that you want to build, so we can make sure that we're meeting your minimum needs. So there's got to be more connection between the suppliers and customers, and sharing that data across the supply chain, not only the end customer to the manufacturer or whoever is delivering the end product, but 2-3 levels down the road, to make sure that everybody understands the demand trends. And I guess the feedback, just quick feedback, whenever you see a demand adjustment or an inventory adjustment, get in touch with your supplier, talk about it, get in touch with your customer. So it's both ways. You have to look up and down in the stream, in the value stream, to really make sure that you're passing the information as real time as possible. So you will see a lot of definitely the timing of communication being faster, the cycles of learning. In the past, many customers only share quarterly forecasts, or most people do these days monthly. I think you have to move to weekly or in real time. As things change, you have to communicate with your suppliers and customers. That feedback loop is really critical to make sure that you can react in the best possible way.
I have two questions. The first one is, since the capacity is finite, right, it's fixed based on the investment, and it takes very long time to build those capacity, a few years. But in the meanwhile, right, the earlier data clearly showed that the industry has shipped the record high number of parts. So what exactly is the industry doing in the short term when the capacity increase is not an option? And what about in the midterm? Let's say, within the next year or two. And then what about the long term? Maybe increase capacity?
I think when the industry saw the shortage 2 years ago, some companies started increasing capacity. Because of the lead time to increase capacity, we haven't seen some of that capacity yet. We're starting to see some of the factories coming online in 22, and we will see more in 23 and 24. So that capacity is coming, and that is in a way resolving the situation. On the demand side, I think also there's also kind of panic buying, right? Like the toilet paper. Everybody goes and buys extra just to be safe because they heard there's a shortage. So I think there was a lot of double booking by customers, and you just order more than needed just to have buffer. And now, if they couldn't get it, then they're probably canceling POs right now, or maybe they have too much toilet paper and now they're not going to the store to buy it, for the next 6 months. I don't know. So we're gonna see that inventory correction that is gonna level load the demand. So I think between those two things, plus there's clearly an allocation going on. So every company is making decisions on which industries to support, what partnerships you have. And then, yes, you probably won't make everybody happy, but you're trying to keep everybody afloat and alive, at least during this year. And in the prior years, that was clearly an allocation decision between very tough decisions by every supplier, right? Who to support, how much to support. That I believe it'll balance itself, in the next 12 to 18 months at the max.
So the first reaction from the industry when there's a shortage, right? We talked about design capacity earlier. What is the design capacity utilization when, those fabs were being designed? Is that like around 80%, 70%? So what is the target for design capacity utilization?
Every company is different, but in general, I would say 80% plus minus 5% is kind of ideal situation. That it gives you some flexibility to recover, and also it gives you probably the best financial answer. Again, depending on the technology and the fab and the investment, companies will target more or less, but and anywhere between 7 and 80% is a very good number financially. When you drop below that or even below 50%, you start losing money at a very fast pace. So that's why companies are very careful when they're going to invest, that amount of money. And then when demand is way higher, if you try to run at above 90%, you will probably make commitments that you will miss because you're committing based on perfect execution, and any hiccup, you will miss commitments to customers and they will be very upset and probably visiting your factories. So it's a fine balance between, what utilization to target and what commit level to use as well.
So the design capacity does have some flexibility in there. And I was told by many friends within the semiconductor industry that they have worked so hard in the last 2 years, trying to solving the very critical shortages. And I think the latest data that I saw was the utilization is over 95% now, that everybody is really doing their very best.
Yes, everybody's full. Everybody running on 8 cylinders, trying to get as much output as possible to help our customers. And yes, I mean, some companies are making commitments and then they're missing it, right? I mean, we see that across the industry right now. But everybody's trying hard. Everybody's trying hard because it's a great opportunity. Plus, there's real demand that you want to fulfill.